What would you rather carry? Something like this or something like this? This is the Montanarian, and we're going to talk about fluid resuscitation. It'll be a three-part. First part, I'm going to tell you why I do not like those things. The second part, we're going to be talking about the other possibility that we have for resuscitation. And the third part, we'll be talking about improvising. And this is where we're going to be talking about this little kit. And so let's start. So what am I holding here is a 1 liter of normal saline. So if anybody's been into hospital, you have this. It is pretty heavy. I don't know exactly the weight. I don't think there's the weight on those things, but it's heavy. It's 1 liter of water. So if you have a platypus or something, just basically fill it up with water and see how heavy this is. So why is the intravenous, I find, that wouldn't be a good reason for having them in the in self-reliance? Well, the first reason is the reason I have this at home right now and not at work. As you can see, there's a bag that is missing. So usually they come in kind of a heavy plastic bag like this that is kind of overlapped. Every time those bags are out of this, they are good for something like 10 days or 30 days. I'm not quite sure, but they're out of this. Because what happened is that this membrane here, because it's kind of latex or plastic, if you leave it on the surface or something, bacteria could make their way through it because it could, with the heat, and so basically it could contaminate the liquids inside. So that's why they have this over plastic on it. The other thing as well is that it can be expired. As you can see over here, it was supposed to be expired on July the 14th. So as soon as this bag, the big plastic, is open, we have to discard them. So that's why I brought one at home, so that because we're about to throw this one in the garbage. So the one of the issue, this is what it is. So the first issue is that they're expensive. They're about $100, I think, if you buy a box of 10 or 20. And this is if you can get a box, because a lot of places, if you put an order in, you'll have to have an order from like a prescription from a doctor to get bags like this. So right there, it's not an easy supplies to get, and even when you get them, you cannot keep them forever, ever. So you have to change them. So if you don't use them, it's rarely you're going to have to start intravenous on yourself. It will be so the supplies. One of the reasons. The second one. And sorry for my folks from the States, and I'll put it at the bottom there. But as you can see over here, between 15 and 25 Celsius, and this is in Fahrenheit. So this has to stay in a certain environment. And if it goes outside of this, they cannot, again, because of that bag over here and the compromise of the liquid inside, that they cannot recommend. They cannot promote how safe the sterility and the content inside. So this is another problem. So that means wherever you keep it, you have to keep it in a very cool and nice dark place with not too much fluctuation in the fluids. And as well, that means that you cannot really have this in your car because obviously it's outside from the environment. So that means that it's another issue that you're going to get is because of the fluctuation of the temperature that you may encounter gets very hard for the storage. So right there already, that's 2 or 3 good reasons for storage that you cannot have. But there's more. So intravenous themselves, the action of starting intravenous, and I'll put an article that very interesting. It's not, I mean, we do it all the time. I mean, at work it can start about, I don't know, 10, 15 IVs a week. And so we do it all the time. And the reason we do it is because a lot of the medication we want to give, we want them to be quick, to react very quickly. And then the beauty with an intravenous, so it does have an advantage, or else we wouldn't do it. But the good advantage of it is that we can titrate some of our drugs, so I can give a little bit less, versus a pill, it's very hard to do. And doing intramuscular or other ways, it takes delays, and also it's a needle every time, versus the other one you start the intravenous and stuff. So there is advantage to it, but one of the big disadvantage of it is the infection rate that you can start, if you can start the IV. So that's another reason too. If you experiment, well, first of all, you don't quite need those videos, because you're experienced enough that you'll know how to start it. But in my own first aid kit, I do not carry the intravenous in it, because the reason is that for the intravenous you need this as well, which I was telling you about the storage and everything and the weight that it carries. So now, if you're able to start your IV on the first shot, you have less chance of complication from having, because multi shots that it takes to start intravenous, more risk you are from having infection. And also just having the IV, you need to change it every 72 hours about, or else the infection can get worse. So just even to start the IV and the infection rate of having the IV inside increase your risk of infection. And then when you have the infection, it's not just an infection of the skin, we're talking probably an infection of all the blood, which is harder to treat, because now you need IV intravenous, and because it's systemic, and it's a little bit more of a trouble to deal with, especially if you have like, so sometimes you'll see like where the IV is, you'll have like a big red line, and basically it follows the whole veins that the IV is, and it grows through all and can go straight to the heart, and then you can have other complication with that. So just that, those two are big things. So now also in a situation where you're in an environment where you have to have a lot of sterility. So that means that I cannot recreate a lot of fluids that I have, because you have to have complete sterility. And I mean, you can see a lot of forums of people talking about starting IVs or whatever, and making their own intravenous. And for IVs, you cannot. I mean, this has to be completely sterile, because any infection you're going to do is going to go straight to the bloodstream. There's no barrier, because like if we have an infection, my skin will be a barrier. If I have an infection in my mouth, my nose, whatever, I'll have a lot of barrier. But if you just broke that skin to put intravenous, and you have any infection into your line, it goes straight to your bloodstream and distributes itself. And again, now you have a lot of troubles trying to deal with all that, so it's a big no-no. So this is just like for the procedure, for the fluids themselves. So now let's talk about the fluid. There's a lot of controversies now, and I mean, in North America versus Australia versus Europe, a lot of different concentrations of fluid. Here in North America, that's pretty much the one that we use a lot, and a lot of people say, oh yeah, there's no damage to give. Actually, there is, and there's more and more literature that's starting to support that, especially in pediatric when there's dehydration. Intravenous is not the first line of going. We go for the mouth. If we really have to, we go through intravenous, and we try to stop it as soon as we can, because drinking, and we'll talk about it in the second part, but the drinking is much better absorbed, easier to on the body than this. They're starting to talk that there's inflammation process that can happens if you give too much of it as well. This is an acidosis. Yes, it's an acidotic product. And why is it a acidotic product? Is because of this number right over here. So the chloride is 154, which is the same as the sodium. So what happens is that if you give too much of those, you have what we call a hyperchloremic acidosis. Hey, I was able to say that without a breath. Hyperchloremic acidosis or non-Indian gap acidosis. Basically, what happens is that in your kidneys, the chloride in your bicarb has the same electricity, and they will exchange each other. And because the kidneys cannot clear the chloride that well, it will clear the bicarb. And so what's going to happen is that you're going to pee all your bicarb, and it's going to keep all your chloride. And what's going to happen is that your chloride, as it rises and your bicarb goes out, your H, which is your hydrogen, will stay mostly in your body and basically will change that as an acidosis. And it's called hyperchloremic, as hyper meaning higher, chloremic as the chloride, so high chloride basically that you have in your body. So those products, if you give too much of this, you will have an hyperchloremic acidosis. So they're not as harmless than it is. Like there's this saying, there's no poison, it's just everything is poison, it's just a question of dose. And this can be not poisonous, but it can worsen your condition if you give too much of it, as well as now there's more literature of if you're in shock, sometimes too much fluid is not a good thing. We're still giving some. Don't scare us that if you next time you go in emergency and they give you one of those, it's not a bad thing. I mean, we're still using them and they're good. It's just like any medication, there's a place for them and there's a way of using them. And personally, I think in rehydration, especially in self-reliance situation, they're not the best place for many of the weight of them, to what you have to carry, the technique that you have to start the intravenous and stuff. You cannot reproduce that, so that means you cannot make it. It becomes a lot of the stuff versus what I'm going to be talking about in the second and the third part. You can carry something like this. No weight, and basically you could redo exactly or more similar and even better than what I'm doing. And where we talk about, while we're on the subject, a bag like this, if I give you into your veins, about an hour or two after, only 1/3. This part, about this will stay in your veins. The other part will go into your body, will go what we call third spacing. It will be kind of coming out because it's an isotonic, but because of the concentrations and all that stuff, about just 1/3 of this bag. So all this part over here won't be staying into your veins. So that's why more and more now into dehydration and website, and they're starting to talk about more about what we're going to talk about in the second part, and kind of deviate a little bit more from intravenous. Don't get me wrong, this still has its place. We're still using it a lot in emergency. We're still using it a lot in the hospitals, and it still has its place. But also, it's not just saline. We're using different formula and everything. And just like anything, it's knowing when, how, and how to use it. But in self-reliance situation, because of all the things that I said, I don't think that this is a good alternative. And unless you score a supply of those bags, and I don't know, like there's an ambulance in front of your house that has been abandoned and stuff, and there's a few of those bags, not much worth to carry. And just even having the supplies to start intravenous, that means also you have to keep up your skills on starting those IVs. And it can be easy over the table when everybody is well hydrated and everything, but if you have someone that is dehydrated or grandma is dehydrated and you have to take care of it, good luck trying to start this IV. There's sometimes I have maybe a rate of 95 to 80% of success in intravenous, but if I go on vacation or something for 2 or 3 weeks, that goes down to maybe 90%. That's how quickly you can lose this technique. And there's even people, sometimes we're 4 or 5 nurses that goes on the same person trying to start those IV, and we still cannot do it. And only the doctor has to come and put some lines into an intravenous or in the neck, and those are the only things that you can have. So it's not that easy also. I mean, it's not a complicated technique, but there's some people that are very hard to start intravenous. And so for all those reasons, I don't think this would be your first choice. So what are the first choice? Let's talk about that in a second.